Video games are often improving or trying to top themselves, but every once in a while, something is added to a game that the people making the games end up regretting. Here are 10 things that were changed or added to games that everybody eventually ended up regretting. Starting off at number 10, the entire Assassin's Creed series has really had its ups and downs, but if there's one thing the series has pretty consistently struggled with, it's how they've handled the modern day storyline. Desmond Miles may not have been everybody's favorite character, but his role in those first 3 Assassin's Creed games gave the modern day storyline a certain degree of forward momentum and a clarity of purpose because it was all based around him. And honestly, the series has been severely lacking that ever since they killed him off at the end of Assassin's Creed 3. After Desmond, the series has really struggled with telling a consistent or even interesting story in the modern day. Frankly, it's been pretty messy. The boss of the franchise even acknowledged just how messy the whole thing has been. They haven't specifically said that they regret killing off Desmond, but the implication is pretty clear. They acknowledged how Desmond was the heart of the storyline of modern day, and they struggled to find a suitable replacement. They tried with Layla later on, but that didn't really land. It's good to see somebody at Ubisoft recognizing the albatross that's been hanging around the series' neck for 14 years now with the whole modern story mess. With a lot of this stuff, it seems like they recognize the problem, but their solution is to just make it even more fragmented and confusing. At least they're recognizing that most people don't care about the modern day story that much at all anymore, and they're just making it more optional. But some people, myself included, liked Desmond and the possibilities he presented. So it's a shame that their takeaway after all these games is to just sideline the modern day storyline as much as possible, because it was part of what made Assassin's Creed special. Next, over at number 9, Cortana in Halo 3. We're actually talking about the level, not the character. So Halo 3 is a game we all have very positive feelings about, but the one black spot on the game's otherwise awesome campaign is the level Cortana. You know, the one set in the flood-infested High Charity where you rescue Cortana. It's just a brutal slog of a level, no matter how you slice it, with a really confusing layout, nearly endless, annoying swarms of enemies, and very frustrating interruptions from Cortana that just slow things to a crawl in a level that's already extremely slow, in a campaign that is otherwise breakneck and kick ass. It doesn't play up to any of Halo's strengths here. It is just kind of a lame stage overall. It seems like nobody really likes it, and at best we kind of tolerate it, and the guy behind the design of the level does actually agree with all your complaints. Paul Bertone, a senior designer at Bungie, is frank about what happened with this level. It was originally going to be a lot more elaborate. You were apparently going to have like a fight with the Gravemind, you know, the heart of the flood, but all that stuff was cut late in development. So they had to have the chief rescue Cortana for plot purposes, so they were forced to completely chop up and rebuild the level, apparently in just like 3 weeks, taking another level called Flooded and turning it into the miserable stage we know today. He flatly acknowledges that in a quote. I don't think we did great there, and that was kind of half-baked mission. It was thrown together because it needed to be there, but he, and I'm sure a lot of developers at Bungie, were just not really happy with that outcome. And so it seems to go with video game development. Sometimes bad stuff gets put into a great game because they just had no other choice, or time or budget was running out. Thankfully, one little misstep did not bomb what is otherwise a kick-ass campaign. Next at number 8, sometimes everybody knows something sucks the second it gets put into a game, but sometimes developers just think that they were cooking when it turns out in practice they really weren't. And this is one of those examples. The second chance perk in Black Ops was simple. If you take fatal damage, instead of just going down, you can use a pistol for 10 seconds before dying. Or with the pro perk, you can survive 30 seconds and get revived. It sounds like a great perk for zombies mode, but for multiplayer, it was a huge miss. It turned every multiplayer match into a mess of non-stop revenge kills with a perk that is so blatantly OP that it was cut from all the future games. Seriously, this perk was in World at War and Black Ops, and then that's it. The game design director at Treyarch at the time did not mince words about the perk. See that gun to my head in my pick? That's how I feel about Second Chance. We meant well, I fucked up. This was from a tweet back in 2011 that we're not even sure exists anymore, but Eurogamer reported on it, so we're inclined to believe it is real. In the same article, they mentioned that Vonderhaar also regrets that one challenge where you had to play Capture the Flag to unlock pro perks. It led to a lot of boosting and people playing Capture the Flag just for the perks. This is sort of the blunt honesty from game devs you rarely see anymore, and it's refreshing. We love to see this. Next at number 7, this time it's less of a mistake or a problem and more just pure distilled hater energy. So Masahiro Ito, the art director for Silent Hill 2 and 3, is just a true industry legend. His work on both of those games is iconic and of course really disturbing. And of his many memorable designs, Pyramid Head is clearly the most popular. This is the thing that people cosplay as, that appears in merchandising and movies. It's the face of the brand, and it's one of the few monsters to show up in more than one game. Fans of the series have found the overuse of this guy to be pretty crass and annoying, but nobody hates the overuse of Pyramid Head in brand and stuff more than his creator, who bluntly stated in 2022 that, and I quote, "I wish I hadn't designed fucking Pyramid Head." It doesn't get more regretful than that. I can't say what exactly is his motivation for saying that, as he follows up by stating that, it's not related to royalties on statues. It seems to just be a general annoyance about how popular the monster has become and how much people tend to associate him with it. He sounds like one of those actors that's associated with one role and then grows to resent it, except he's an artist and game designer associated with one single iconic video game monster. I think he's just sick of talking about it and hearing about it. He's got other stuff he wants to make and doesn't want to dwell on one random design he made in 2001, but hey, that's how life goes sometimes. Now at number 6, remember the many cake is a lie jokes from the 2000s and early 2010s? If you were actively on the internet back then, these memes were all over the place and everybody was collectively getting pretty sick of them. Well, if you hated hearing people say the cake is a lie, then you weren't the only one. The guy who came up with the joke, Portal 1 and 2 writer Eric Walpaugh, was also sick of it. He was so tired of the joke that before release, he specifically said, "If you thought you were sick of the memes, I was sick of it way ahead of you." It sounds like he's being vague, but then he followed that up with, for instance, cake. I've had enough cake jokes. I absolutely do not want to try and resurrect a 3-year-old meme. That sounds like it would be kind of sad. So yeah, Walpaugh made it pretty clear in the lead up to the release of Portal 2 that he was sick and tired of the cake jokes as everyone else. Even if, funny enough, he did end up including at least one reference in Portal 2 to cake. Mostly to have the characters in game express how sick they are of the joke too. Next over at number 5, borrowing the dialogue wheel from Mass Effect is widely considered to be one of Fallout 4's bigger flaws. Surprisingly enough, Todd Howard regrets how the dialogue system works too. In an interview with GameSpot, Howard admitted that he didn't think the dialogue worked that well and ended up limiting role-playing potential. He admitted that they were attempting to make dialogue more interactive and interesting, but the implementation fell short. He plainly acknowledged how limited the wheel was for making choices, and while they didn't remove it from the game, they did at least try to address some of the complaints with the Far Harbor expansion. That add-on is considered by many to be one of the better things in Fallout 4, so it sounds like they took criticisms to heart, and with Fallout 76 and later Starfield moving away from that wheel, it sounds like Todd wasn't just blowing a bunch of hot air. He really did take the feedback, and the team really changed things, how they worked on future games. Now at number 4, poise is one of those confusing stats in Souls games that changes with every single one of their games and is never properly explained anywhere within the game itself. It's one of those things where you just have to go to some external source like a wiki and look up what it does and how it actually works. Basically, poise affects whether your attack gets interrupted or not when hit. With high poise, you can keep attacking even when taking damage. With low poise, you get interrupted. It's a simple concept, but how it's actually calculated is confusing as hell, especially in Dark Souls 3, where it took a long while before players even began to understand how it was calculated. The guys at From Software are notoriously tight-lipped about just about everything when it comes to these games, but in a rare interview with the series director and president of the studio, Hidetaka Miyazaki, he actually acknowledged the studio's lack of communication by saying that in relation to poise and how it works, quote, "This isn't something we are particularly proud of. With how things are handled now, it can be improved, and this is an agenda item we'll be working on in the future." So, a pretty standard cryptic response from Miyazaki. People were mad at the studio because they didn't tell anyone how poise worked in Dark Souls 3, and here comes the studio head to tell everyone that they're sorry about the poor communication, they'll fix it in the future, but then they still never actually explain how poise works. I think his real regret was making certain stats so confusing in the first place and to provide more obvious documentation in the game to make all this stuff more understandable. If that was something something they were serious about, then they did improve tutorials and in-game communication somewhat in Elden Ring. It's not a lot, but at least it's a little better than in the Dark Souls games. There's still a lot of stuff that's barely explained in their games, though. I mean, like even in most recently Night Rain, a multiplayer-focused game, you'd think they'd want to be a little more clear on how everything works in a purely mechanics-focused thing. But even there, it's vague, and a lot goes unexplained. So this whole thing seems to kind of be like one big sorry, but not really sorry from Miyazaki. And you know what? It seems to be working for them. Now down at number 3, Star Wars: The Old Republic and making the game a World of Warcraft clone. While this game is undeniably some kind of success considering its longevity, it's nowhere close to, the monolithic World of Warcraft. Nothing can touch that. It's the game that dominated the MMO space for 2 decades and counting. Like many attempts to steal World of Warcraft's thunder, The Old Republic was essentially just that game, but with Star Wars. Just looking at the 2 games, you can see the obvious similarities, For his part, the game's director, James Olin, pretty much admits that they tried to follow the World of Warcraft formula as closely as possible, almost to a fault. It's a choice that he's come to regret, as he's expressed in an interview with Game Informer where he straight up said that, and I quote, "With Star Wars: The Old Republic, I wish that I pushed a little bit more towards making it a kind of Knights of the Old Republic online, rather than Star Wars World of Warcraft." He mentions all the feedback they got back at release from fans wishing that the game was closer to Knights of the Old Republic games, and he actually agrees, and if he could go back, then he would have done things differently. Look, I don't know how an online version of KOTOR would actually be. I mean, hey, they could have just made it more like Star Wars Galaxies too, if you ask me, but either way, at least it would have been something different, rather than, just a kind of World of Warcraft in Star Wars with lightsabers and stuff. And to be fair to the developers, like the Old Republic has way more of like a story and dialogue focus than World of Warcraft, which does make it unique. And again, it never really mattered because, it seems like the Old Republic was a success either way. Now down at number 2, wave dashing. Back in 2010, Smash Bros. Creator Masahiro Sakurai gave an interview where he said that, and I quote, "Melee was just too difficult." He never went as far as to use the word regret, but it's pretty clear from what he's saying that he wasn't happy with how the skill ceiling turned out in Smash Bros. Melee. He doesn't specifically call anything out, but it's pretty obvious that his problem lies with the high-level play, like how that was conducted. The thing he doesn't like and probably regrets is this wave dashing. It's this mechanic that only extremely dedicated and highly skilled players will ever really master. It makes for interesting tournaments, and that, among other quirks, is why Melee is still so popular to this day. But for Sakurai and the team, that sort of super technical skill that only the best of the best players can master isn't the sort of thing he wants in the Smash Bros. Series. There's a reason why all this sort of stuff is gone in Smash Ultimate, and while hardcore players may not like it, I just don't think Smash Brothers is the type of game for that kind of serious player who's only picking the top tier fighters and only wants to play no items, Final Destination only. And it appears that Mr. Sakurai agrees. And hey, if you don't like it, then at least Melee is still there. It's certainly not going anywhere. It's going strong. That's not the only regret Sakurai has. He also seems to regret tripping from Super Smash Bros. Brawl, which, yeah, no argument there. That can go. Now, down at number 1, we saved it for a big one. We're going back to 1999 with this interview with Nintendo's Shigeru Miyamoto, the mastermind behind, among other things, the Mario and Zelda games. And of course, he was very involved with Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time for Nintendo 64. This is a legendary game, but if there's one thing that everyone hates, it's the obnoxious, annoying little fairy Navi that's constantly interrupting the game early on to give you a bunch of hints that you probably don't even need. But the obnoxious
listen!
Every time she pops up just makes her presence even more grating. The fairy was annoying, and thankfully, Miyamoto agrees, even as far back as 1999 when it was only a few years past the game originally released. He specifically calls out the Navi hint system as being the biggest weak point of the game. He never goes as far as specifically saying that he regrets putting Navi in the game, but it's pretty obvious that he was unhappy with how the hints and how the sounds were implemented and could have done things a little differently. Now, from Miyamoto's perspective, they wanted to have a hint system of some kind in the game to be able to help out players who might be confused or struggling and trying to figure out what to do, but they couldn't figure out how to adapt this system to more seasoned players who don't need the hints. They eventually just gave in and left the hints in, thinking that it would be better to have something rather than nothing at all. Navi haters may not agree, but I do at least see where he's coming from as a designer, and to his credit, the hint system got a lot better in Twilight Princess and beyond. You know, then it got kind of awkward and annoying again in Skyward Sword, but now we're getting way off track. The big takeaway here is that even in 1999, Miyamoto knew that Navi was annoying as hell. But those are 10 examples of things that were added to games or changed in games and developers ended up regretting it. We love talking about these. These are really interesting. No hate to any of these developers because, you know, you try things, you try to be creative. Sometimes it's a win, sometimes it's not. It's fun to talk about, so let us know in the comment any other examples you know of. If you like this video and you like talking games with us, we put out videos every single day, man. Just click the like button. It helps us. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.